Mr. Stark, it's good to have
What's
you
up, buddy?
here.
How you doing?
It's
Yeah,
good.
good. Thank
After
you.
after all our technical difficulties, we got everything set up, it seems. So for the audience that doesn't know you, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Yep, no worries. Kevin Stark. I finished a career as a Navy SEAL where I served for 22 years. I've been retired for 4 years now, and since then been doing some personal coaching and leadership consulting, and leading a few retreats. So, got three young kids, married, and enjoying living down here in the South right now.
So how did that happen? So like what's the beginning of the story? I always like to go through, try to go through things in order. So like what was the beginning of it all? Why'd you get into the SEALs? What inspired the move?
Yeah, I think when I was in school, high school, I realized that I was mature enough to know that I was not mature enough for college. So I just spent, I think, most of high school staring out the window and just wanting to go on adventures and do something, man, exciting with exciting people, and just kind of experience the world outside of a classroom. So I knew that early on I wanted to do something else. And it wasn't until probably later in high school when I thought about the military and went down to the Navy recruiter and got their little VHS tape, which was about a 40-minute summary of the SEAL teams. And I probably watched that 100 times. And that's when I made up my mind. I knew I was going to do that. And I joined the Navy when I was 17. And as soon as I could, after graduating high school, went to boot camp. And then after that, went to SEAL training. So I was just turned 19 when I checked into BUDS. And then the next 22 years of my life were an adventure of a mix of operational training and deployments, and then a mix of um, training the next generation of SEALs as an instructor, or helping to shape the community when I was at the Naval Academy through leadership development.
So now you're leading retreats. What does that mean? Like what is that?
Yeah, so I think the premise for me after I got out was, how can I continue to serve? And I think most veterans, or most people, I think, who come from a team environment or an environment where your mission and your purpose is very clear, the absence of that can be very striking for someone. And for me personally, when I retired, it was hard to find things to align with. In the military, you're used to, you know, you walk into a room and you absolutely know what your purpose is, and how you can best serve the mission and your teammates around you. And when you get out, you got to find it. And that means being really good at knowing yourself, knowing how you want to serve and what you want to do for others. Um, so for me, it was like, okay, I really enjoy helping people overcome obstacles. I really enjoy being a part of others' path of self-discovery, and unlocking things that are within people, setting up, whether it's training scenarios, discussions, conversations, or opportunities when people can kind of transcend those limits and arrive at new ways of experiencing themselves, and they complete things, they complete obstacles, and they say, holy shit, I can't believe I did that, or I'm so proud of myself. If I can shape events like that, um, I think that's how I serve society at large now. And the retreats are just a mechanism to do so. You take a group of people who want to experience something new, they want to learn some skills, whether it's around personal leadership or managing stress or performance or whatever it might be. And I think you take them out of their environment and put them in a new environment. And I think that helps to really facilitate learning and togetherness. So just one of the things that I do that I enjoy.
Well, I want to expand on the part of path of self discovery and stuff because that's anytime I do any of these interviews with various SEALs, some of which anytime I do it, one of the main questions I always ask is how do you find purpose in life, right? And I guess how do you find purpose in life?
Hmm. That's a great question. Probably 100,000-year-old question when people sat on the ledge of their cave dwellings and looked at the stars and said, why am I here? What does this all matter? Um, to me, what I've come to realize is that meaning and purpose is a choice, and that in this moment right now, I find meaning in our conversation because I choose to be of value to you and your listeners. So, Viktor Frankl says, great, you can find meaning in anything and connecting with someone and doing a task, and you can even find meaning in your suffering. It's just up to you to decide and to choose what that meaning is. So I think a lot of times, and myself included, I spent times reaching externally and reaching outward for meaningful work, a meaningful path, meaningful existence when meaning can be achieved just by choosing it. You can have immense meaning by drawing circles in the sand, um, like the Buddhist monks do, and they practice that mindfulness. And ultimately, meaning is just being in that present moment and being grounded. And no matter what it is you're doing, applying yourself fully to it. So that is a one long way of saying that meaning can be found at any time and any place. You just have to be very intentional about it.
There's a Greek myth that it reminds me a little bit of what you're saying. I feel like you're familiar with it, Sisyphus, and the
Mm-hmm.
concept of a man that's cursed by the gods for the rest of eternity to roll a boulder up the mountain, and every time he gets to the top, it rolls all the way back down, and that's his existence for eternity. What do you think of that tale?
Well, once again, it's up to Sisyphus to determine his purpose and if that's meaningful or not. You could look at it and say, damn, you just keep doing the same thing over again. Or for him, it could be, this is my chosen meaning. I prefer to do this. I've been assigned this. Life has given me this task to do. I'm going to meet life's call by investing myself fully in it, even though it rolls back down and I choose to push it back up again. That's almost an example of how powerful choosing meaning is. So it's a great example of not pointlessness, but the sheer ability that we have to make things meaningful, even though they might seem pointless to others.
And for those that not necessarily find meaninglessness in their work, but struggle to start to work to begin with, right?
Mm.
They lack utility almost, right? They don't know how to get up out of bed in the morning. What would you say to a person that is depressed or can't get out of bed in the morning?
Mm. I don't know. Eventually, you get out of bed for something. you know, Even the most base drive will get you out of bed, whether it's to so you don't pee on yourself or because you're hungry. So that's the starting point. Um, you've eventually got some type of motivation in there. That's such an extreme case. that if you're that utterly depressed that you don't choose to get out of bed, um, man, I would sometimes in those situations, and I've doubted myself, I found comfort in the simple thing that if someone else can do it, then it's possible for me to do it. Um, if someone else can finish this incredible feat, they have been given nothing different than I have. I've got the same human operating system, relatively, right? Does it mean I'm going to jump from the free throw line and dunk a basketball? No. Um, but can I go out there and try to shoot some hoops? Yes. Um, so sometimes in those moments when you don't see within yourself the capacity to do things, look outside of yourself. And if you remember that we're all connected in some ways and that we're all pretty similar in some ways, you can take comfort in someone else as an example. And I think that in ancient societies, they knew this. That's why we had tribes, and the younger generations would watch the older generations as an example because we copy each other from birth, right? We're constantly modeling ourselves after others. And if you find yourself alone and unable to model, it's because of the nature of your environment. So find someone else that you can model yourself after and slowly chip away and make progress at that would be my advice.
What about people that lack a level of internal peace?
Hmm. Shit, man, I'm not the Dalai Lama. I don't know. um, and there's probably many reasons for that. I lack internal peace plenty of times. Um, and sometimes it's about getting clarity on what it is that's ruffling your feathers or that's causing some lack of peace. It's usually always within. So just really getting good and honest about yourself and doing some deep digging and giving yourself some grace and patience, man. Like being willing to listen to the things that might not be what you want to hear and making peace with that can be very helpful. And just acknowledging that, hey, man, sometimes you have pain or you carry some things with you that are hurting. And that's the first step is just acknowledging that and saying, okay, but I choose not to let me stop pushing this boulder up the hill.
At one point in your journey, you spoke about having a sense of almost like lost purpose, right? Like you
Mm,
had purpose as a SEAL and in the military, as a lot of people do, and then afterwards there was, I guess, something absent, right? There was some, I
mhm,
guess, for lack of a better term, a void almost that SEALs kind of left in you, right? You had this purpose, this mission, this goal, this great group of people, you know, everything was like you had a got like guidance, right? And then you left, and for a time at the very least, there was some distance from that.
mm.
So, what would you say for people? What advice would you give to people that have lost purpose?
Yeah, I think the just like going back to the beginning, purpose and meaning is a choice, right? So just remember, hey, I own this, um, which is good because then that lets you start the work instead of externally like, oh man, this is purposeless, and society this, the country this, you know. It's like, okay, I have a choice in the matter. Let me pick and choose a path that at least aligns with what I enjoy doing or something I want to learn about and just start going down that path. Um, so by doing something like that, then you're like being intentional about things, and that's meaningful and purposeful. You know, the military exacts a lot from you, but it can only do that because the, the clarity of what you're doing is absolute. Um, so you can put forth maximum energy because you know exactly what it is you need to do, even though it's really hard. If you and I are standing at the base of Mount Everest and we got to climb it together, there is no mystery. There might be a little bit in how we get to the top, but you and I know exactly what the heck we need to do. So all of our energy can focus on a step that we need to take forward. But if we're standing in the middle of a desert and someone just says, go anywhere, then we got to look at each other and decide what the hell are we going to do. So that can be the confusing part. So I think just choosing a path and then knowing, like Robert Frost says, the way leads on to way. Um, just take a step and see where that leads to you. That can be helpful. One thing after leaving the military, I spent a lot of time like, all right, I got to find the job. What's the one thing I'm going to do for the next 20 years? And it's like, no, shit doesn't work like that. Um, just take one step and then another one and then another one. So it's almost just a series of present moments where, you're taking steps on things that you enjoy doing. To me, always coming back to service. All right, how am I serving others without compromising myself, right? How am I providing value to others? How am I being a good husband, a good father, a good friend? That's meaning right there. And then in service, if you use that as the bedrock of your path, then you can develop skills to get better at that service, right?
That's a good one. Time is just a series of present moments.
Yep, one now at a time.
One now at a time. That's a good one. I gotta hang that up on my wall somewhere. Life is just one now at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, and I guess in your case too, they struggle with which now they want to go
Mm.
with, right? And when, this is something that I remember when I was talking with Will Branham, in my conversation with him, he's like, just get up and move. He's a lot more
Mm-hmm.
adamant. He's a lot less down to earth than you, but same message though. Get out and
Mm-hmm.
do something great with your
Mm-hmm.
life. So when it comes to exactly what direction, right? Like, does that mean anything that might be good for you that might lead you to something else? What does the now that people should be choosing or shouldn't be choosing? Like, how do you pick that? How do you pick
Mm.
the next step of your life?
Good question, man. I've tossed this ball around quite a bit, and I still do. Um, coming back to the original one is like, okay, ultimately, to me, if you follow all of the most, I would say, remarkable examples in history of people who have contributed in some major way, they were ultimately acts of service, right? Every single religious figure and prophet. I mean, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, like all, you know what I mean? All of these people did something for others. So if you start there and say, okay, that doesn't mean I'm not going to pay attention and take care of myself. Like I'm going to build my skills, but I'm building my skills not to toot my own horn because then you're just going to be on an island. But ultimately, how am I going to build my skills? How am I going to do things to help others? Whether that's art, music, um, writing, building a house, being an engineer, doing podcasts, right? Something is providing value for other people. So that is a place to start. Now you can start and say, okay, I'm struggling to get out of bed. I'm really having a hard time motivating myself. Who are some people that I just look at and say, that would be a path that I think is exciting, inspiring, or motivating? Someone out there has to be someone like that. And then just take a step down, maybe something that they do, or learn more about something that they are doing or learning about. And that can get the energy flowing down that path. Just like he was saying, like take a step, like do something. Um, and even if you don't know shit and you're totally lost, like for real, like just take a step. Because in action, you will then be able to reflect, and at least you'll know, okay, I didn't like that path. Great. Now let's turn right instead of left. But being idle, when you stay without putting energy out into the world, nothing will come back to you, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. You have to be the one to put some type of force into the world to see what comes back. And then you can decide, yeah, I like what that return was, or no, I don't, go a different direction. But that's the promise, that's the wager, if you will. Nothing's free, you know. So you got to put something out there. And if you don't know what it is for yourself, look to other people as an example.
Is there anybody you look to?
Oh man, tons of people. Freaking Jesus, Gandhi, my wife, my friends, you, shit. I was like on LinkedIn, I was like, this dude's in high school. I was like, he is in high school doing a podcast, interviewing people. I was like, how cool is that? And I thought to myself in high school, I was like, fuck, man, I didn't know anything in high school, you know? So you can find inspiration anywhere from anybody. Everybody has some gift or something that they are doing or something you can learn from them. So it doesn't have to be some mountain of a human, Navy SEAL. It could be anybody. And if you listen and watch and learn from that person, they will have something that they are teaching you. Um, Even if it's don't be like that person, right? Because that's a lesson too. So, um, yeah, there's a lot of folks out there, but one thing I would say, and I'm glad you asked this, is look at somebody who is serving others. Um, who is somebody that is genuinely giving something to people, whether it's hope, teaching, inspiration, knowledge, strength, something. Um, and you can see through that and discern who that is instead of who is out there self-promoting, who is out there doing something only to earn a transaction at the end, right? So that would be, I guess, my advice is look for someone who's inspiring, but then someone who's also serving others in some way.
Something very, I guess, important that I always talk about that I feel like a lot of, I guess, like average people don't tend to understand. Like a regular person, like Joe Schmo, right? And something I say often is that everybody's just a person. And that's one of the major things that I learned since starting this podcast is that whether it be, one of the most famous YouTubers that like I used to be like a really big fan of, somebody that I would talk like, and all of a sudden like I just talk to them like very casually now. And and I'm not even like a super big YouTuber or anything myself. I just talk to these people now. And I'm like, huh, that guy is very average now to me. As a little kid,
Mm,
if I were to get any type of interaction, I would be like, oh my gosh. But now it's just like, oh, this person is like a friend of mine now. And
mm,
it's not like insulting to the people, but it's like I realize now that they're just people, right? At the end of the day, that they do everything basically the same as a regular person. They just have, just a lot of people know about them and what they do, and they might be really good or somewhat knowledgeable of what they do. And there was this kid, he's a 16-year-old South African stuntman, and you know, he was talking to me about how people would recognize him in public, right? As like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram and everything. And he barely even shows his face. And he's like, people recognize me all the time. He's like, but then he says, he's like, it's so weird because, when they come up to him and like, relax, like, I'm just like you. So, and it's weird to see not only a kid be that humble about it, but it's also weird to see like this kid, not be excited, like, oh, like not like in a bad way, but she'd be like, "Oh, like come on, like I'm just a regular guy, just like you." But what are
mhm.
your thoughts on that? I guess
No, it's true. I mean, like I said, everybody has the same. relatively, right? Operating system is the gift you were given the day you were born, is this mind, body, spirit. What separates and distinguishes people is, where they put their energy and focus and the intensity of which they do that. Um, that's what makes people burn brighter than others. Um, it's not that they are inherently brighter, it's that they generate the energy to do so. Like they put in the work, the effort, the focus, the thoughtfulness, thought. Um, so and that might separate or distinguish somebody from your own experience. But it's important to realize that, that person, the gift primarily is the amount of effort they put into something. And you can appreciate that, but also, as your friend said, and as you said, like, they are human beings. I mean, everybody sleeps and wakes up and eats food, and it's just what you choose to do once again in that present moment, um, and being proactive and intentional with your actions instead of being in receive mode, which is like now the war for our attention is full on. It's the greatest commodity on earth, is the human attention, our consciousness, and people are doing everything they can to consume it. So if you can guard that and then put that instead onto your efforts and your energy and doing things out there, like, you'll be distinguished as well, but in your own path.
Well, I guess for me, what it was when it came to because as a kid, I never really met any of those types of people. I never like got to meet, I guess, any real famous people. So, when you start doing it now, because like as a kid, I would see these people on YouTube and stuff, and I guess I just wouldn't think of them as like real people,
Mm-hmm.
almost in a weird way. Not like in a super kid way to where I think they literally don't exist, but in the sense of like, I guess metaphorically to me they didn't exist. Like they were just, people I would watch, that would make cool videos and stuff. And but I never and I might have even understood it, but you don't really understand, I guess, or like most people don't really understand until you actually meet a lot of these people, until like you like interact with them, and then you're like now it's always with Taylor Swift, right? Like, everywhere I see Taylor Swift, and I'm like, at the end of the day, she's just a woman, she's
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah.
a woman that makes, pretty good songs, you know,
Yeah.
and
No, it's true,
that's
man.
no
It's funny.
insult to
It's
her.
like, exactly. Yeah.
It's no insult to her. She's hardworking as hell. I'm sure of it. I've heard she's pretty kind, pretty generous, but to me, at the end of the day, she's just a woman, a
Mm-hmm.
maybe generous songwriting woman, but just a woman.
Yeah. And songwriting is effort, generosity is effort. So the things that she's being noticed for, I guess, is just like where she's put that focus, energy, and I'm sure she's obviously talented. Um, but yeah, she didn't just stumble upon a guitar. Like, she was like putting in the time. Um, but also in the process, I think, of being excellent and being a true craftsman, of where you're honing your expertise and your skills and learning your craft, you reach things, or you attain experiences that people want to learn from, or that people want to gravitate to, which is a good thing, man. It's inspiring to us. There's tons of people where I meet them, I'm like, damn, that's awesome. I'll be on a run and someone will just fly by me like a bird. And it's like, oh, that's cool. It's important, because the first thought in my mind is, man, if I train my ass off, can I get to be like that person? It's an example, to follow. And then it's also something to appreciate, right? Appreciating other people's craft and work. It's like a work of art. It's pretty neat. And it's good. I'm sure those people served as examples for you. And you're like, man, should I do this YouTube channel? Shit, I don't know, fuck. And then like you do it, and then but you had those examples, even if they seemed distant and far away, it was enough of an example for you to take that step. And then, man, now you're pushing that boulder up pretty damn far. So that's pretty cool.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's it's definitely crazy in a lot of ways. Like I don't know if you're familiar with like the comedian Bert Kreischer, for example, right?
Mm-mm.
The Machine. And well, this he's like a famous comedian, and recently too, I think I posted something on Instagram and I tagged him in it, and he saw it, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But I also thought to myself, I'm like, the reaction I had to that wasn't as big as it used to be either.
Mm.
Right? Like I used to have whenever it was any type of like, oh, I have this autograph thing by this famous person, or I have this from a famous person. It like as a kid, it always felt like so much greater. Like they were, people would talk about them all the time. They felt like almost like fictional, like I've
Mm-hmm.
said, like movie characters, and now and now it's just like you realize you're like, oh, this is just a person that does things. That's like you're saying a lot of effort, but it also should inspire people a lot more to
Mm-hmm.
do work. It shouldn't really serve as and that's the worst thing a person could have. It's the why does this guy have more than me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, or or not the why, because the why actually might lead you to a legitimate answer, but
Yeah.
it's the wow, this guy has so much more than me. I could never do that. Or oh,
Mm.
this guy got lucky at one point, and
Mm.
or the mindset of why don't I have as much, or diverting it to a completely incorrect answer and saying, well, that guy was probably born into money, or oh, that guy probably had this,
We
right? It
use mm.
Yeah.
we use our own experience as a reference and a template to judge the experience of others. So if you see someone who isn't, excuse a shitty way of saying it, further from you or more advanced than you in some realm, the to explain that delta is often you got lucky, or Taylor Swift just got lucky, and what you don't see is the you know 20 plus years of her strumming guitar since she was a kid type thing. Um, it serves as an easy way for us to explain things, and it can also be, to your point, detrimental because it might seem too far away, because you look at your own experience and you say, holy shit, I can't even spell guitar, instead of picking it up and trying to strum a few chords, right, and starting from the basics. And now you're pushing the rock. um, so yeah, a lot of times we look at someone else. Maybe you look at someone with a billion followers and you had two, and you use your own frame of reference and life experience to explain or to understand someone. But when you decrease the delta and you realize, holy shit, I'm on this path, like I know it's not a mystery. It's these fundamental human truths of like focus and effort and work and just applying and learning and growing, right? That adaptation, like that belongs to everybody. Everybody has the ability to adapt and to learn and to grow. It's just a matter of turning that shit on, and the catalyst for turning that shit on is a stressor, right? Fuck, I can't play that song. I need to learn that song. That stressor will drive you to practice if you know you can grow and learn and model with other people. Or it can be interpreted as, I just suck at guitar. So you you got to be careful. And I think it's important for people to be voices like you, to be a voice and say, look, man, I was the how the hell is this even possible person at the foot of the mountain, but now I'm like part of the way up, and I've built a confidence that, like, hey, it's just one step at a time, right? And then for you to take those lessons learned and to share them with others, because I promise you there's someone watching your shit who is exactly the same as you watching someone else. And they're in the very nascent beginning stages. So it's the human fabric and the continuous story of development that we share with others. I think that helps us all grow.
Yeah, and it's a great point though that it has a lot to do with experience and people's experiences because that's I haven't heard that before, but that is absolutely true. People kind of base it off of their own experiences. I am no stranger to that, and it's funny because like the first guy I had on, right, was a YouTuber that I'd watched for like a pretty long time. First guy I had on, and he had something like 3 million subscribers, like millions and millions. And he was the first person I reached out to, and I'm like, okay, he's probably not going to respond. 5 minutes, he responded, and he's like, sure, let's. I'm in Asia right now, but let's contact me in a week and let's do it. We did
Nice.
it, and then yeah, and that's like the first. That was the first video on my channel, but in interacting with him, you could probably tell I was talking way too much. I was a little bit nervous, but it became less of like a wow, what's this person really like? And I
Mm,
also noticed myself getting less interested in it's a bit of a strange effect, but I noticed myself getting less interested in like the news, right? And politics and things like that. Not in the sense of, you know, like in the sense of I know that these are just people. So that when now I listen to the news, I'm like, what's the point of this? Like, this
mm,
is just a story that is partially true
mm,
about another person, right? Because there's always going to be some exaggeration, some human bias, whatever you want to call it. But then, like, you start like realizing that a lot of they're all just people. Every celebrity that you meet, every person that you think of is just that, a person. And I've said that probably 50 times already, but it's truth. It's something more people got to realize. But also, I think laziness is a part of it. Because
mm,
people are naturally lazy and they don't want to put the responsibility on themselves in a lot of ways too. They don't want to say this guy did it because of hard work. So then they'll go and deviate it to, he just probably got lucky. Because then they don't have that responsibility of, well, I have to work as hard as him. Because, I had a guy named Robert Johnson. He worked for the Secret Service for years and years and years. And he was Bill Clinton's bodyguard at one point. He did work for Jimmy Carter and stuff. And he said one of the things you realize when you start working with the Secret Service is you have to work the same amount of days, or sorry, the same amount of hours protecting these people as they are working,
mm,
right? Which is oftentimes 16-hour days with no sleep.
mhm,
So it's not an easy job because you have to work off of no sleep, no eating, no drinking water, anything, just for 16 hours straight or longer. And then you have to go everywhere with them. You have to drive with them. You have to drive them everything you can imagine. So it's not like and everyone yet still wants to criticize like, oh, why did this guy make this decision or
mm,
why did this guy do that? It's like I don't, and to me, in a weird, and now it's like I hear that I'm like I don't really care. It's like he might have had a good reason, might have had a bad reason, but why it doesn't really affect me.
mm. No, that's interesting. I think, yeah, it's very, your point about laziness, like we've, in my opinion, right, 2 cents here, in an attempt to de-stress ourselves, I think we've engineered the ability to be intentional and to accomplish things out of our lives. Think about 1,000 years ago, you and I would probably be sitting around a fire with the elders planning, you know, a hunt tomorrow, because if we didn't eat. There's no grocery stores and refrigerators around, and our sole purpose in life was to feed the tribe and our people and to protect them. I mean, so we didn't waste time being depressed because the purpose of our lives smacked us in the face every single second of the day. Um, But now, there's a lot of cross talk and crosswinds and missed signals and a lot of fluff built up in our world. So you almost have to be very discerning with, how you interpret the world around you. And to your point, how you, are very careful about who's trying to create an agenda or a story to make me believe or do something and turn this way or that way. So yeah, you got to be very aware, and you got to almost transcend the fluff around you. That's why I think it's important to do things like hard things where it's just you and the thing, whether it's a mountain, a, a run, a track workout. Like there is no excuses, there is no alternative except you putting forth energy to get it done. Like there is nothing else. There is no phone call, there is no internet, there's no bullshit. Like you just have to get it done so that you can experience what you're made out of every once in a while and just ground yourself and be like, okay, like this is real. Like this is me being real. So I think that's an element that's missing in today's society. If I was to go on a little rant, it's just like doing incredibly difficult, hard shit once in a while so you can experience the depth of who you are and be fucking proud of yourself. And in that process, you shed away all the stuff that doesn't really matter. Like, hey, what do people think about me? Am I good enough? Like, all that shit goes away when it's just you in the present moment overcoming something that you're not sure you can overcome.
Most people, actually, to some extent, I want to say all people, but I'm going to say most people for now, are a lot more capable than they think they are.
Oh,
And
100%. Yeah.
that includes me. Like, when I first started working out, right? Granted, I will admit I become less consistent with it, right? For various reasons. Partly because of my own laziness. But when I first started out, it felt like this colossally tall task, right? Like my
Mm-hmm.
friend would be like, "Hey, you want to work out?" And I would go with him, and it just felt like I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like there was no direction. I was just kind of there because I never done it before. And then like fast forward a year from that, I was benching like 195 and at like 165 and all this. And I was while I was weighing 165, I was benching 195.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, this is really good for me. I felt happy and I felt like I'm like, this used to feel like this colossally high task, or running a mile at one point used to feel like a colossally high task. Then after a while, I was like, this is easy. And then it was like 1, 2 miles. But I was always sitting there to myself saying, I can't do this. Like, I'll never be able to run a mile. Like, not literally saying that, but always a
Mm-hmm.
subconscious notion that I can't do that because I've never done it before, to your point about experiences. As a kid, I really wasn't that athletic. I never really did anything. So when you actually try it and then you actually start pushing yourself, it feels really, really amazing because, well,
Mm-hmm.
actually, I shouldn't say it feels amazing. It's terrible, but it feels amazing once you accomplish it.
Yes. Yeah, man. Spot on. And that's like all the hacks in the world will never ever take the place of that necessary human experience because that's the catalyst for growth, man. Like the day that is replaced by an algorithm or a machine, and it's close, it's already happening with making decisions and thinking. Um, that's it, man. The end of human growth and adaptation, because we have to get through the pain and the struggle and the friction, right? That's the secret sauce. That is the purest human element. And if you don't do that as a person, that's when depression creeps in, right? But if you do it and you make that a part of your life, and you got to remember, like the mind doesn't typically want to do that shit. Like it wants like homeostasis. Like I don't want stress. Like I just want to fucking boom. Um, so that's why I don't think like the mind is in charge. Like you're not your mind. You're beyond that. Um, so you have to be the catalyst for the mind and realize like this like temporary narrative of self-preservation and like, oh, this is gonna hurt, like that's temporary, like that shit will go away. And you can watch it and you can almost laugh at it, like whether it's getting in a cold tub or like doing sprints or whatever it is, or doing like some gnarly bench workout. You can watch your thoughts beforehand, and you can just be a spectator to that and not abide by it.
Yeah, man. I mean, to your point about the future and with machines and stuff like that, that's human nature too, to make want to make things easier and easier for ourselves. Innovation, progress, that's
Mm,
kind of what we say is the ultimate goodness, but it's not necessarily the case sometimes. I
mm.
mean, you could argue that phones make 99% of our lives easier. It also makes us a lot more depressed, you know,
Yeah,
debatably. But well, not debatably, that's the truth. But yeah, I mean, also, I think that when it comes to machines in the future and stuff like that, there is one thing I might disagree with because at the end of the day, no machine can give you unless if you want to buy plastic surgery, no machine can give you the satisfaction of you working out and you achieving your goals through that, for example, or athletic
mm.
achievement, right? So that's the first part I would say. You know, even if, or you could even argue that you know, no machine will give you the satisfaction of making art yourself or building your own house or of making your house how you want it to be. At the end of the day, that's also part up to you. How creative you want to be and how you want to live your own life. Machines can do as much as they want, and people can make them as advanced as they want. It's up to you whether or not you want to use them for every aspect of your life, though. That's also part of it.
I agree, but I would also say that think about virtual reality, these VR goggles, right? People jump into those things and maybe they play a game, and that game, is whatever the heck game it is, where let's say they're building a house or flying, or it's so real and intense they're playing a basketball game and the crowd's cheering. Their brain is getting triggered, right? And that dopamine is flowing, and the cortisol, the raise their stress, their heart rate's going up. So in to the mind, they are accomplishing these feats and these things, and they take off the goggles and they have that inner sense of satisfaction of having completed something. um, but it's not fucking real. So that would be a caution, um, just to be aware of, because it's new now, but in the future, I mean, people are going to lock themselves in these worlds because they've determined that that world is much more pleasant, and they can dictate that world with their feelings and their minds and have it go their way instead of the necessary heat and friction of making your future resemble a present moment that you desire.
Viktor Frankl did have a quote.
Mm-hmm.
And you're smiling because I feel like you're a fan of his. But he had a quote which is a man without purpose will try to fill that void with pleasure by
Mm-hmm.
seeking out pleasure. So,
Mm-hmm.
but also I to your point about virtual reality of, you're in a basketball court, everyone's cheering for you, and to the mind there's no difference. I would have to slightly disagree in the sense of, it's like anything else that we have now that's artificial, right? Whether that be, I'm going to use an extreme example, cocaine, right? Or alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
right? One could equate alcohol to confidence, right? Or cocaine to energy or caffeine to energy in a less extreme example, right? They're not real and you can tell the difference. You know internally that, you know, even when I'm tired and I drink caffeine, I drink a bunch of coffee, I'm like, I don't feel the same as if I just had a good night of sleep. And I know that from experience of doing that. I still do it, but I know it's not the same, you know. The only thing that I like that's artificial that, you know, is better than the real thing is Diet Coke. Other than that, everything else is there's always something different, right? There's always, you know, internally that you don't feel as good as the guy that got it the real way, right? Anybody can just go drink and then talk to a girl that they might be nervous about talking to. You know, it's another thing to just naturally have that confidence or to naturally be that bold.
Mm.
Or in the case of exercise, right? Like all these people taking Ozempic right now, it's not the same as if you went on the diet and you made a lifestyle change. Because, I know for a fact that in about 10, 15 years from now, Ozempic's going to cause your eyeballs to bleed or something. I don't know. There's always going to be something we don't know about that 15 years later. Oh, we didn't know. Same thing with vape companies. They want to say it's nicotine without any bad stuff. Next thing you know, people are dying
Mm.
of collapsed lungs, right? And that happens, right? Like maybe they just and part of it is just not knowing, but there's always gonna be the idea that you can't truly supplement, a lack of realness, right? A lot of times you can't just undo a lack of realness, no matter how good the machine is or how good the algorithms are. There's always some sense of human realness to it. That's my take on it.
Mm. Perhaps now, um, what who's to say someone's not going to unplug from that VR experience? But I do see your point. Um, One thing you said, right, is having a few drinks so you have the courage, and it's not really the courage. It lowers your, apprehension to speak to the girl by someone who's naturally courageous. I would say maybe that person isn't naturally courageous. They just chose to go down that path and then build the courage because you've transcended that difficulty. So anything that you go through that's challenging and hard, if you're afraid, if you're uncertain, and you go through that, the gift is yours forever. That courage, the lesson learned, that experience, you keep that. And that's how you build your skills and your capacity. So that element of uncertainty and fear, man, is necessary for us to step through that, because every action has an equal opposite reaction. The reaction to doing so is like, man, now I have courage because I did that. So like, hey, I can go talk to this girl. I don't need to have a drink because I've done it before. Or even better now, I can go do something else because I know from my previous experience doing these things, if I'm a little bit afraid, I can still go do it because I'll learn from it. So you can then model that behavior for other situations where maybe you're afraid. But if you remove that unease or that distress, that catalyst for growth from your life, you will be depressed, no matter how cool your VR experience is, because you'll take it off and go, fuck, I'm still at square zero. I haven't changed.
Right. Well, that's what I'm getting at with I it's really the same idea as video games as a whole. The video games that we have right now, that's the way I see it in the sense of, for example, if I'm playing Call of Duty, right, and I beat Call of Duty, that's a cool feeling. But at the end of the day, it's also, only so satisfying. It's also a maturity thing. Like I don't play video games as much, right? But like as a kid, you do that and you're like, wow, this feels really good. I'm doing this, and then you finally beat the game and you're like, wow. Then after a little bit, you're like, now what am I supposed to do? Then you find a new game, then the cycle repeats. But there's there, I think like I said, there's a distinct difference between what you know is real versus what you know isn't real, right? And like, if the movie The Matrix, for example, right? People will get anxiety if you're like, oh, what if everything's like a simulation, for example, right? That gives people a lot of anxiety, but ultimately, but that's because people know inherently that something that's real is better than something that's not real, right? They want to have
Mm,
experiences that actually are important. As the crave for human like purpose, importance, desire, utility, you know, that's the way I think about it. And there was like an interesting case. During the 1950s, there was a woman, right, who she had this button, right, and it was connected to this thing that would shock her brain basically, right, and it would only go to the feel good centers of the brain, right, like the pleasure whatever centers of the brain, and she would just after a while she just pressed it all the time. She'd press it once, she'd feel like, wow, everything's great. She pressed it so many times every single day that her thumb began to blister, right, every single day. So that's an extreme example, but I that's kind of, I guess, like the very extreme path that like this whole like Neuralink, for example, or virtual reality or AI could go to. It's like the utter extremes of human laziness and where a lack of purpose will divert people to just this endless seeking of pleasure, right?
mm,
And oftentimes in the seeking of pleasure, you can go away from purpose entirely, right? There's plenty of people that have done that where they go on the path, they don't know where to go, they lack purpose, so they try to go to pleasure, and then they get so distracted with pleasure that they mistake it for purpose, and then they forget about their purpose entirely.
yeah. I mean, pressing the shock button is and getting a blister, and I'm sure she had to press it more and more and more because the brain adapted to that stimulus, right? It's the same shit as anything else that you do for that dopamine, that quick hit of pleasure, of the feelings that are generated from you know thoughts and emotions. That's like the surface of the ocean. You're playing with the surface of the ocean, which is gonna, I don't know, it's just constantly in flux and changing. So living a deeper life doesn't mean you don't laugh and have fun and enjoy shit like that. It means you're not attached to it. Like you're at the bottom of the ocean in deep crushing depth, but you can go visit the surface and have fun, but you're never swept away by it. That's where you're gonna, I think I mean, obviously we see it with drugs and alcohol and everything. People are lost to that.
Well, people are lost when it comes to drugs and alcohol because that's the prime example of what Viktor Frankl was talking about, of the seeking pleasure in exchange for purpose, right?
Mm,
Of the, or not in exchange, but in a person without a purpose will seek pleasure
mm-hmm,
and look for pleasure. Drugs are the very literal embodiment of that, right? Like when people take pills, like painkillers, for example, for the first time, a lot of times it's not just physical pain that they lack. All of a sudden, they also lack suddenly a lot of emotional pain. So that's a very literal example of, you know, instead of going out into the world then and finding a purpose that it, I guess, justifies that emotional pain in a way, right? Like you learn from it and then you move on and you gain purpose in something else in the world, whether that be in some cases, your case, maybe temporarily joining the military or maybe becoming a craftsman or becoming a whatever, like that purpose might be, they see something that just numbs them all of any pain. And then they just go, all right, well, that's what I need. Right. And that's where it comes from a lot of times, even if they don't know that they're doing it. And you could say, well, what about the guy that, was star of the football team, for example, that then gets addicted to heroin because he got hooked on pills because he broke his leg one time? That happens too. But that usually stems from this just feels really good. And this is, this makes me feel great and accomplished without me having to do any of the work too. So all of a sudden, I feel really good instead of having to work towards it. It's just this endless spiral.
Yeah, man.
I know I'm looking at you like you're about to say something really profound, but
No,
you know,
man. Like there's no need to. Like it's and I don't have anything profound to say besides yeah, man.
that's all right. Yeah. But yeah, that's I mean, do you have any, I guess, what I completely forgot about the question list. We were just having such a great conversation.
That's
Um,
good.
yeah, that's a good sign of a good talk. But what was, I guess, in your time in the SEALs, right? What was the main thing you learned? If you could boil it down to one or a few lessons, what were
Mm.
they?
And that's tough. Mm. Human connection matters, and having purpose matters. And this is like any modern theory of psychology says in order for there to be fulfillment, well-being, there's got to be some sort of connection with other people, meaningful connections, and you're doing something that matters to you. So the big takeaways, I mean, if I look back on my career, was if you're in an environment where you are connected to the people around you, a team of people, and you're doing something that matters, you can do amazing things or things that people think are astonishing. But to you, it's it's natural. Do you know what I mean? It's like someone might say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you jumped out of a plane," or "I can't believe you did this or did that." And it's like, I trained for it. It's like go back to Taylor Swift, right? She didn't just pick up a guitar and sell a million records. Like she fucking sucked at it at first, just like everyone else. So I trained for it, practice, repetition. I put in the heat transfer mechanism of growth and learning. But I did it with people that I cared deeply about. So I wanted to be um, accepted by them. Humans will do a lot for acceptance. And I also wanted to do something that mattered. So then my experience, my existence mattered. So when you have that, when you expend your energy on it, it's like a worthwhile thing. I call it like the ROE, your return on energy. What's your return on energy when you apply it to something meaningful and in a connected space with people? It's fulfillment. So that would be my big takeaway, I think. And training and practice, 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 practice. You know, I tell my kids all the time, like, my daughter will throw a fit if she gets something wrong. I'm like, Vivian, if you get it perfectly right, if you drop the football, are we going to throw it again? She says, yes. If you catch it, am I going to throw it to you again? She says, yes. So I'm like, it doesn't fucking matter. It's like Kobe Bryant, right? It's like winning a championship's great, but Monday morning, I go right back at it. So I'm going to enjoy the moment, but I'm also not going to let it overtake me. Like I get back to work. So I think those are some of the big things off the top of my head that I learned.
Yeah, always be a little bit hungry. I think that's an important part of
Mm.
human nature. And not necessarily even in like a greedy way or
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to be an ingrate either, right? Where you're like, oh, nothing ever satisfies me, and
Yeah.
and always need more, and I need a new car, I need a new this. Like
Mm.
nothing ever makes you happy because there's plenty of people that are very rich that also have that mindset, which
Hmm.
is the opposite of good. But I do believe in, being a little bit hungry of like, all right, this is good, but what about this? Like, maybe, right? Of the, like you're saying, you win a championship, feel good, but don't forget, you get another one, you know?
Hmm.
Go back Monday morning, get to it, because if you don't, then it doesn't matter, right? Like
Hmm.
whether you do or you don't, the sun's gonna rise, and it's also gonna
Yeah, it's
set.
like is is Kobe deriving meaning in his experience from the championship or from the path of which a championship and losing a championship might be one step along the way, right? It's so he's very grounded. He was very grounded in the path in the present moment. So it was I really appreciated what he brought to the table.
Did you ever get to meet him, or
No, unfortunately I didn't. But yeah, when I just listened to some of his interviews or read some of the things he wrote, I'm like, that's good stuff. Obviously, and it's funny, influenced by Phil Jackson, who's also influenced by more of the being centered and being in the present moment, the Eastern thought. And I don't want to attribute Kobe's thinking to that. He came up with whatever he did on his own, but I'm saying it's probably not a coincidence that it's kind of interrelated there. That you know, thinking that something outside of yourself is going to make you happy and fulfilled only leads to a never-ending chase. Um, so balancing, coming to the surface and reaching outside without ever losing the anchor point to the middle and the center, I think is important.
yeah, yeah, stay grounded, like you were saying. Don't, because again, for me, it's you always gotta make sure you don't tiptoe the line of between being an ingrate, somebody that's always
Hmm.
just everything sucks. You always need something better. Nothing is ever good enough because, again, like I know a lot of people like that, and that happens all the time. People, they get so caught up in the chase that they forget about why they're even chasing,
Hmm.
right? Like that's a very common thing, is that they just get so obsessed with, I want more of bigger, better progress. Like we're saying, progress does not automatically mean good, right? A lot of people say that is, and right, and that sounds like a very contradictory statement, but progress, just making something bigger, badder, better, whatever, doesn't automatically make something perfect or the greatest, because there are some beauties in making things have flaws or having things that are flawed, right? In some cases, right? You could argue that some of the greatest people on earth had some type of flaw, right? Like in terms of like hard workers, like they were obsessed with what they wanted. And that's fine. They found fulfillment through that, but it's not necessarily because they wanted a nicer house or whatever. They just wanted more for their art form, right? In a lot of cases.